I've been on the bench long enough to recognize every kind of sound a courtroom makes. The nervous clearing of a throat. The shuffle of restless feet. The quiet sigh people let out when they know they're about to be judged. But that morning, inside the courtroom, I heard something I wasn't prepared for. Laughter. Not nervous laughter. Not embarrassed laughter. Confident laughter. It came from the woman standing before me, the billionaire's wife. And it echoed just enough to make everyone else in the room go completely still. I didn't move. I didn't react. I just watched her. In my decades of experience, I've learned something important. When someone laughs in a place where they shouldn't, they're not trying to be funny, they're trying to assert control. This wasn't a woman afraid of consequences. This was a woman who didn't believe consequences applied to her. The courtroom itself felt smaller in that moment. The wooden benches creaked as people shifted uncomfortably. The clerk paused mid-sentence. Even the air felt tense, like it was waiting for something to break. I looked at her face carefully. She wasn't smiling because she was amused. She was smiling because she felt untouchable. I've seen arrogance before. Plenty of it. But this was different. This laugh wasn't meant for me, it was meant for the room. A quiet reminder that she believed she stood above it. And as I sat there, hands folded, eyes steady, one thought crossed my mind. This case is not going to be simple. Because laughter like that always hides something. And what she didn't know, what no one in that courtroom knew, was that this single moment would expose a secret far bigger than unpaid fines. A secret no one was prepared for. Before we dive in, I have a small favor to ask. Wherever you're watching from, drop it in the comments. I'd love to know who's joining me on this journey. And if you want to be part of something special, hit that subscribe button and help us reach our very first 100 subscribers. Your support means the world, and together, we can grow this channel into a place full of unforgettable stories. Every comment, every click, every subscriber, it truly matters. Her name was Victoria Ashworth Peton. You didn't need the case file to know she lived a different life than everyone else in that room. You could see it in how she stood. Shoulders back, chin lifted, eyes calm. Not a trace of anxiety. Her clothes were perfectly tailored. Not loud. Not flashy. Just expensive in a way that whispered status instead of shouting it. She approached the bench like this was a brief interruption to her day, not a legal proceeding. I introduced the case. Parking violations. Missed payments. Accumulated fines. Routine. But she sighed, softly, dramatically, and waved her hand as if brushing dust from the air. "Judge," she said, still smiling, "this is obviously a misunderstanding. These things are handled for me. I didn't realize something so minor would require my presence." Minor. That word hung in the air. I've heard it before, from people who measure inconvenience differently than the rest of the world. To her, time in court was an annoyance. To everyone else, it was stress, fear, consequence. She wasn't disrespectful outright. She was worse. She was dismissive. Her eyes wandered around the courtroom as if she was already thinking about where she needed to be next. A meeting. A lunch. Somewhere more important than here. And I could feel the judgment forming in the room. People always assume the same thing in moments like this. Here we go again. Another rich person expecting a free pass. I didn't correct that assumption. Because sometimes, letting people believe what they believe reveals more than stopping them ever could. But then I noticed something else. Standing just behind her, not beside her, not next to her, but behind her, was a man who didn't fit her world at all. And that's when my attention shifted. Most people didn't see him. And if they did, they dismissed him instantly. Marcus stood quietly behind her, hands clasped together so tightly his knuckles had turned pale. His suit was clean, but worn. His shoes polished, but tired. He didn't look up. Not once. In all my years, I've learned to watch the people who don't want to be seen. They usually carry the heaviest truths. While Victoria stood comfortably in the spotlight, Marcus tried to shrink into the background, like he hoped the walls would swallow him whole. His breathing was shallow. His shoulders tense. He looked like a man bracing for impact. I asked Victoria a routine question. Then another. She answered quickly, confidently, always for herself. But something about Marcus bothered me. Not because he was quiet. Because he was afraid. And fear like that doesn't come from parking tickets. I leaned back slightly and looked past her. "And the gentleman with you," I said calmly, "what is his role here today?" She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "That's Marcus," she replied. "He works for our family." "Works?" That was all she said. Marcus didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't even blink. "Marcus," I said gently, "would you step forward, please?" The entire room shifted. He hesitated, then slowly obeyed. As he approached, I could see it clearly now. The exhaustion in his eyes. The tension in his jaw. The weight he was carrying without saying a word. I hadn't asked him anything yet. But I already knew. This man was standing in the middle of something far bigger than himself. And when I finally asked him one simple question, just one, everything began to unravel. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean forward dramatically. I asked the question the same way I've asked thousands before, calmly, evenly, almost casually. "Marcus," I said, "who was actually driving the vehicle during these violations?" The room didn't react at first. Victoria stayed perfectly still, eyes forward, posture composed. She didn't even look at him. That alone told me something. People who trust others don't avoid eye contact in moments like this. Marcus froze. I could see his throat tighten as he swallowed. His hands unclenched, then clenched again. For a few seconds, it felt like time slowed down, like the courtroom itself was holding its breath. He said quietly. Not a whisper. Not a declaration. A confession. A low murmur rippled through the room. I felt the shift immediately. The case had just changed direction. Victoria turned sharply toward him. Her expression didn't explode into anger, it collapsed into something else entirely. Shock. Fear. Calculation. "What are you saying?" she asked him under her breath. Marcus didn't look at her. For the first time since he'd entered the room, he lifted his head, and looked straight at me. "I drove," he repeated. "Every time." I nodded slowly. "And why?" I asked. "Would you be driving a vehicle registered in her name?" That's when Victoria's control began to slip. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. Her fingers tightened around her purse strap. The confident woman who had laughed minutes earlier now looked cornered. Marcus exhaled, long and shaky. "Because I was told to," he said. The words hit the room like a dropped glass. Told. Not asked. Not hired. Told. I let the silence stretch. Silence is powerful. People rush to fill it, especially when the truth is heavy. "Marcus," I said gently, "help me understand what's really happening here." His shoulders sagged, like something inside him finally gave way. And then he said something that had nothing to do with parking fines. Something that explained everything, and yet made it so much worse. "But before I explain that," he said, voice cracking, "you need to know about my wife." The moment Marcus said the word wife, the courtroom changed. This wasn't about traffic violations anymore. This wasn't about fines. This was about survival. "My wife's name is Elena," he said. "She's 32. He paused, struggling to breathe evenly. 6 months ago, she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I've presided over cases involving violence, loss, devastation, but there's something about that diagnosis that still makes the room go cold every time it's spoken aloud." Someone in the gallery inhaled sharply. The clerk stopped typing. Victoria stared at the floor. "We don't have insurance," Marcus continued. "I'm paid in cash. No benefits. No safety net." His voice trembled now, but he didn't stop. "When she got sick, I tried everything. Loans. Selling our car. Borrowing from family who didn't have anything to give." He shook his head. "I was choosing between rent and chemo." The words landed hard. I felt it in my chest, that familiar weight that comes when you realize the law is about to collide with reality. "I couldn't lose my job," he said. "I couldn't say no to anything." Victoria closed her eyes. And then, Marcus continued, someone stepped in. He looked up again. And this time, his eyes went straight to her. "And then," he said softly, "she did." That's when the courtroom went completely silent. "She paid," he said. "For the treatments. The hospital stays. The medication." People shifted in their seats. Victoria's composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes, threatening to spill over the mascara she'd applied so carefully that morning. "And she did it without telling anyone," Marcus said. "Without asking for credit. Without wanting recognition." I turned slowly toward Victoria. "Is that true?" I asked. She nodded once. "Yes," she whispered. And just like that, the story flipped. I've learned that first impressions are dangerous things. Moments earlier, the room had already decided who Victoria Ashworth Petton was. A wealthy woman who laughed at the law. A billionaire's wife who expected special treatment. But now, that laughter took on a different meaning. Not arrogance. Armor. Victoria took a breath, steadying herself. "My husband controls everything," she said. "Every account. Every transaction. I don't have access to my own money without his approval." Her voice shook, not from guilt, but from fear. "If he found out what I was doing," she continued, "Marcus would have been fired immediately. His wife would have lost treatment." She looked at me then, really looked at me. "So I found ways around it," she said. "Charities. Anonymous donations. Third-party payments." The room absorbed that slowly. This wasn't recklessness. This was strategy. And the fines? I asked. She let out a quiet, bitter laugh, the same laugh that had frozen the courtroom earlier. I couldn't pay them, she said. Not without triggering alerts. Not without questions. The irony settled in. The woman who appeared careless with money was trapped by it. Her laughter wasn't mockery. It was fear disguised as confidence. I glanced at Marcus. His eyes were filled with tears now, gratitude mixed with guilt. She saved my wife's life, he said. I just didn't know how to protect her in return. And that's when I realized something deeply unsettling. Helping him had cost her safety. Her freedom. Her anonymity. And it wasn't over yet. Because the moment money, secrecy, and power collide, there is always a price. And she was still paying it. As Victoria spoke, something became painfully clear to me. Power and freedom are not the same thing. People often assume wealth unlocks every door. That money removes fear. That influence equals control. But standing there, listening to her, I realized she was living inside a cage most people couldn't see. My husband monitors everything, she said quietly. Every withdrawal. Every payment. Every deviation from routine. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She was explaining a system, one built to keep her compliant. If I paid the fines, she continued, questions would have been asked. Flags would have been raised. And once that happens, there's no going back. I understood then why the violations kept piling up. Not carelessness. Not entitlement. Fear. Fear that one wrong move would expose everything, the secret payments, the hidden compassion, the one decision she'd made on her own. Marcus stood beside her now, no longer invisible, no longer silent. I told her not to help us, he said. I told her it was too dangerous. Victoria nodded. But I couldn't walk away, she said. Not when someone's life was on the line. I looked at her hands. They were trembling slightly. This wasn't a woman afraid of the law. This was a woman afraid of what waited for her outside this courtroom. And then Marcus shifted his weight, reached into his jacket, and said something that changed how this court saw everything. But there's more, he said. Marcus stepped forward and placed a small stack of papers on the bench. Not loose pages. Not scribbled notes. Organized documents. Medical invoices. Hospital statements. Treatment schedules. Receipts. Proof. I brought these because I didn't think anyone would believe us, he said. I began flipping through them slowly. Dates matched the violations. Amounts matched the care. And every payment. Every single one, traced back to anonymous foundations and third-party charities. But anonymity leaves fingerprints. Shell organizations. Intermediary accounts. Patterns only someone careful, and desperate, would create. This wasn't random generosity, I said quietly. No, Marcus replied. It was deliberate. Victoria closed her eyes. I kept records, Marcus continued. Because I was scared. Scared that one day I'd need to protect her the way she protected us. The courtroom absorbed the weight of that moment. This wasn't just emotion anymore. This was evidence. Truth with a paper trail. I set the documents down and looked out at the room. That's when I knew, without a doubt, this verdict would not be ordinary. I leaned back in my chair and took a long breath. In matters before this court, I began, we are guided by the law. The room was completely still. But we are also guided by intent. I paused. The violations are real. The fines are valid. Victoria's shoulders tightened. However, I continued, this court recognizes extraordinary circumstances when they exist. I looked directly at her. These fines are dismissed. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. Victoria covered her mouth. Marcus's knees nearly gave out. But I wasn't finished. Marcus, I said, your honesty today matters. This court will ensure you are connected with emergency medical assistance programs immediately. Tears streamed freely down his face now. And Mrs. Peton, I said, turning back to her, your laughter earlier suggested indifference. She nodded slowly. But what this court has seen today, I said, is not indifference, but courage hidden behind fear. I closed the file. This case is concluded. The gavel never came down. It didn't need to. Because the real verdict wasn't written in law. It was written in truth. I've ruled on thousands of cases. Most of them fade with time. But this one stayed with me. Because it reminded me how easy it is to judge someone based on a single moment. A single laugh. A single expression. We assume we know the story. We rarely do. That courtroom taught me something I carry with me to this day, that wealth can hide suffering, silence can hide sacrifice, and arrogance can sometimes be armor. Before you go, I want to ask you something. What do you think justice should look like in cases like this? Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, I read every one. And if stories like this matter to you, subscribe. These are the cases that don't always make headlines, but should. Because sometimes the loudest laugh hides the quietest pain.